Welcome to Under the Scope with Pastor Billy Daws. Christianity is filled with joy, peace, grace, and hope. But let's be honest, it is also filled with battles that cut deep into the soul. Over the next several episodes, we're going to walk through what may be the 20 hardest things in the Christian life. Not the things that sound difficult from a distance, but the struggles every real believer eventually faces. Tonight, we begin with one of the hardest lessons of all, learning to wait on God without forcing outcomes. That moment when heaven seems slow, when the promise tarries, when you're tempted to step in, manipulate, push, pressure, fix, control, or help God out. Abraham faced it. David faced it. Joseph faced it. And if you've walked with Christ for any length of time, you've faced it too. Because waiting feels like inactivity. Waiting feels vulnerable. Waiting feels like God forgot. But sometimes the deepest work God does in us happens in the silence between the promise and the fulfillment. Tonight, Pastor Billy is going to take us deep into the tension of delayed answers, forced Ishmaels, surrendered control, and the difficult beauty of trusting God's timing. So pull up a chair, open your Bible, and let's place this first hard lesson under the scope.
There are few things harder in the Christian life than waiting on God. Not because we doubt His power, but because we struggle with His timing. We can handle movement, we can handle activity, we can handle battle. But waiting exposes us. It reveals whether we truly trust God or whether we merely trust our ability to make things happen. And the truth is, most of us do not like waiting. We want answers now, healing now, direction now, deliverance now, open doors now. But God often works slowly, deeply, carefully, because He is not merely trying to change our circumstances. He is trying to transform us. The Bible is filled with people who had to wait. Abraham waited for Isaac. Joseph waited in prison. David waited while hunted in caves. Israel waited in bondage. The disciples waited between the cross and the resurrection. Even creation itself is waiting now for redemption. Waiting is one of God's primary classrooms, but here is where it gets dangerous. When waiting becomes painful, we are tempted to manufacture outcomes. We start trying to help God out. That's exactly what Abraham and Sarah did. God promised Abraham a son, but years passed, nothing happened, silence stretched on, and eventually Sarah said, maybe God needs our assistance. So Hagar entered the story, and Ishmael was born. Listen carefully. The flesh is always impatient with God's timing. The flesh says, if God is not moving fast enough, take control. And humanity has been creating Ishmaels ever since. Relationships forced ahead of God, ministries birthed in ambition instead of calling, financial decisions driven by fear, manipulation disguised as wisdom, doors kicked open that God never opened. And the tragedy is this: many of the painful storms in our lives were not caused by the devil, but by our unwillingness to wait. Psalm 27:14 says, wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and He shall strengthen your heart. Notice something astonishing. Strength comes while waiting, not after waiting, during waiting, because waiting crushes self-reliance. It forces us into dependence. And God is deeply committed to teaching His children dependence. We say we want God, but often what we really want is quick relief. We say we want His will, but secretly we want control. And waiting exposes that. That's why waiting can feel like fire, because it burns away illusion. It reveals idols we didn't know we had. It shows us how addicted we are to certainty, outcomes, control, and visible movement. But somewhere inside the delay, inside the ache, inside the unanswered prayer, something holy begins to happen. A deeper yearning for God Himself begins to emerge. Not just His blessings, not just His gifts, not just His solutions. Him, that is the hidden treasure of waiting. God often delays the answer because He wants to deepen the hunger. Because hungry people pursue God differently, desperate people pray differently, broken people worship differently. People who have sat in silence with God begin to value His presence more than His presence. David understood this. Listen to the cry of Psalm 42. As the deer pants for the water brooks, so pants my soul for you, O God. That is not casual Christianity. That is desperation. That is holy longing. That is a man who discovered that God alone can satisfy the deepest thirst of the human soul. And sometimes God allows the drought so we will finally thirst for living water. Let me say something that may ignite your heart tonight. The greatest danger in the Christian life is not suffering. It is becoming satisfied without deep communion with God. Many believers still attend church, still sing songs, still know Bible verses, but inwardly they have lost their hunger. And waiting has a way of restoring hunger. Because eventually every earthly support begins to fail, people fail, money fails, health fails, plans fail, emotions fail, and suddenly the soul begins crying out, Lord, I need you. Not religion, not performance, not image. You, God knows how to bring His children to that place. That's why He sometimes slows everything down, because hurried souls rarely develop intimacy with God. We live in a microwave culture, but God grows oak trees. He develops depth slowly, roots slowly, character slowly, dependency slowly. That's why Isaiah 40 says, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength." The word wait there carries the idea of entwining yourself with God, like threads woven together. Waiting is not passive sitting. It is active clinging. It is remaining near God when you do not understand Him. It is worshiping while confused, trusting while hurting, praying while empty, standing while trembling. And in those moments, God becomes precious, not theoretical, not theological, only personal. The waiting room becomes a sanctuary. The silence becomes holy ground. And the believer begins discovering that God's presence is better than immediate answers. That is maturity. When you stop saying, God, get me out quickly, and start saying, God, don't let me waste this season. Draw me closer. Oh, friend, God is after more than solving your problem. He is after your heart. He wants affection, communion, dependence, abandonment. He wants sons and daughters who crave Him more than outcomes. That's why some prayers are delayed, not because God is cruel, but because He is deep. If every prayer were answered instantly, many of us would seek God's hand without ever seeking His face. But waiting teaches us to seek His face. And when you truly encounter God, you discover something astonishing. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not the answered prayer. Sometimes the greatest miracle is the person you become while waiting, the surrendered heart, the softened spirit, the broken pride, the deeper worship, the greater hunger, the holy dependence that is gold forged in fire. So tonight, if you are waiting, do not force the door. Do not manufacture the outcome. Do not create another Ishmael. Wait, pray, worship, seek Him, yearn for Him, because the God who seems silent is often doing His deepest work underground. And one day you will discover the waiting was not wasted. It was the place where you learned that Christ truly is enough.
What a powerful reminder today. Waiting on God may be one of the hardest parts of the Christian walk, because everything inside of us wants to move ahead, fix the situation, force results, or take control. But as we heard today, God is not merely working on the situation, like He is working on us. Sometimes the delay is where faith is formed. Sometimes the waiting is where trust deepens. And sometimes God slows us down because His timing is producing something far greater than anything we could manufacture ourselves. Thank you for joining us today on Under the Scope with Pastor Billy Daws. And if today's message encouraged your heart, Pastor Billy has written several Christ-centered books designed to help believers grow deeper in their walk with God, strengthen their faith, and understand the Scriptures more clearly. You can find Pastor Billy's books on Amazon by searching for Billy Daws. This week, we are focusing on the path to spiritual maturity. And if the Lord leads you to help support this ministry, your prayers and financial gifts help continue these Bible teachings, devotionals, and encouragement resources for believers around the world. You can support the ministry by mail. Simply send your gift to Billy Daws 2, 335, Council Lane, Buford, Georgia 30519. You can also find ministry and support links in the podcast description. And above all, please continue praying that God would use this ministry to encourage believers, strengthen churches, and point people to a deeper walk with Jesus Christ. Until next time, keep trusting God's timing, keep walking by faith, and keep putting God's truth under the scope.